Okay, so we've seen now pronouns for direct objects, for indirect objects, the pronoun e, and today we will look at the pronoun en. The partitive is important because it uses de, and de will be important when we want to use en. So, what is the partitive? Well, quite simply, it's what we use when we don't want to say the exact quantity of something. In English, we would often use some, but we don't really need to use anything in English. In French, you always have to use the partitive if you're talking about an undefined quantity of something. You're not saying how much of something there is. Let's take a look. So, an example in English, he eats cake. We do not know how much cake he eats. It's an undefined quantity. Nothing has been used. We didn't say he eats some cake. We just said he eats cake. But in French, since we don't know how much cake, we would have to use the partitive. Another example, I would like some milk. So here we actually have the word some, telling us that we don't know how much milk. It's just an unknown quantity. So, when we go on to use the partitive in French, we use de. And if the object isn't countable, so you can't count it, just like you can't count milk, you would use either du, if it's masculine, de la, if it's feminine, or de l'apostrophe, if it comes before a vowel. For countable items, let's say talking about how many apples you have, not saying how many, you use des. Il a mangé du gâteau. So here we use du, because we're talking about cake. We don't know how much cake. We're not counting multiple cakes, so it's not necessarily a number. It might be a piece or a portion. So it's an unknown quantity that's not countable. What's that next one? Je voudrais des escargots. Talking about snails, we could count how many snails. So we're going to use des. Now, be careful. If you're talking about something in general, it's not that we're saying I had some of it, but we're just talking about maybe I like cats. So I don't like some cats. No, I just like the idea of cats. I like them all. When it's general like that, you use le, la, or les. J'aime les chats. If you said j'aime des chats, it's like saying I like some cats, which is a different thing. All right, so I'm going to have you try a couple of partitive examples. Try translating these sentences into French. I am buying shoes at Foot Locker. I have ice cream in the freezer. Do you have any books? And do you like music? Some of them will use the partitive. Some of them might be a general statement, so watch out for those as well. I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. Just pause the video, and when you're ready to come back, come on back. So, now we begin the pronoun en. What does en replace? Pronoun en replaces a thing or an object that comes after either a form of de or it's something that's used with a number. All right, and when we say a form of de, of course, that could be de la, du, de, etc. So, here we have an example. Il boit de l'eau. So he drinks water, some water. We've used the partitive here, so we have de. We have a form of de. So we want to replace il boit de l'eau. We're going to replace it with en. Just like all the other pronouns we've used so far, it goes before the verb once we replace it. So, we restate this. You could say il en boit. He drinks some water. Try another one. Il va lire beaucoup de livres. Well, this one's a little more complicated because we've got these two verbs, va and lire. Lire, to read, is in the infinitive. It's unconjugated. Va is the conjugated verb. Just like in the other examples we've done with the pronoun e and with direct and indirect object pronouns, the pronoun here will go in between these two verbs, before the unconjugated verb. So, before lire. This is not the partitive. Instead, it's an expression, beaucoup de livres, lots of books. That's why we have the de here. We're taking out the de and the livre. We're not touching the beaucoup. That's going to stay in the sentence. So, we would say, il va. So we use our conjugate verb. Then we add our pronoun, il va en lire, which goes before the unconjugated verb. And then we keep beaucoup. Il va en lire beaucoup. All right, in this one we have a number. J'ai vu 3 vélos. 3 is our number. It's describing how many bikes we saw. So remember, when we use a number and an object, we want to replace the object, we can use en. When we do this, we do need to keep the number in the statement. So, if we were to restate this with taking out vélo, we would say j'en ai 3. Kind of like saying I have 3 of them. The en in this case goes before, oops, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. J'en ai vu 3. I saw 3. And the en goes before the a, because a is a helper verb. In the passé composé, remember that the pronoun goes before the helper verb, which is different from when you have 2 verbs, one being conjugated and the other in the infinitive. J'en ai vu 3. Joue-t-elle du piano? Does she play piano? Let's say we're responding to this question, and we want to say, no, she does not play piano. So just like we've seen in the past, the pronoun will go after the ne, but still before the verb. So non, elle, and it's going to be n apostrophe, because when you have an ne before vowel, you do the apostrophe. Elle n'en joue pas. And we replaced du piano. Elle n'en joue pas, elle joue de la guitare. Combien de mains a-t-il? How many hands does he have? So you could answer this with a number. You could sit here and count how many hands he has. Or we could use a word like beaucoup or plusieurs. In both of these sort of representing a numerical value, we could use with en, just like we would with a number. So, for example, I could say il en a plusieurs. He has several. We can't just say il a plusieurs, he has several, like we would in English. We need to keep this en here to let us remember that we're talking about hands. The en represents the hands. So with the e pronoun, we did an example where people went to France. Ils sont allés en France. When you're replacing en plus an object, you could use e. But very specific, when you have a de plus a place, we're going to have to use en. So they came back from France. Ils en sont revenus hier soir. Quand sont-ils revenus de France? Ils en sont revenus hier soir. They came back from there last night. And then finally, don't forget that en or une, even though it might mean a, that's also a number. So when you say I have a dog, you're kind of saying I have one dog. So if we had as-tu un chien, and we wanted to replace it, replace chien, we can't use le, because it's not le chien. We're not talking about a specific dog. We're talking about a dog, one dog. So if we respond to this question, we would say j'en ai un. We have to keep that en to say that, yeah, I have one. As-tu un chat? If you're doing the negative, you don't need the number because the pas replaces the number. So you could say non, je n'en ai pas. All right? You could not say je n'en ai pas de chat. You can't say that, remember, because your en has replaced your de chat. So this would be repetitive. You could say je n'en ai pas or je n'ai pas de chat. So here's a couple questions for you. Some of them use the pronoun e and others use the pronoun en. So try to look back at both videos and answer these questions. If you have any questions, send me an email or ask in class. Bring these into class. Merci. Au revoir.